Did I just hear you're moving?
I asked you, I have all the shoe boxes in the back of my car. Not right now, but when you're done, would you mind
I
helping?
can't believe it, I've been here so long.
I
Good
know.
morning, dear.
It's-
Didn't
Life
I hear you
changes,
say
but-
you're moving?
Yeah, Mississippi.
Why
Joy, you need-
Mississippi?
It's
Thank you,
very
yeah.
low cost of living. We got priced out of the market here in Florida. Our homeowners insurance got canceled about 6 weeks ago, and for no reason other than because they could do it.
Just because.
Yeah, and we had our homeowners and our automobile insurance bundled to save money, and trying to find homeowners insurance for something you can afford, forget it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so,
We're gonna miss you
Yeah.
both very much.
Some people really do a lot and they make a big hole.
well, and the thing is, I mean, I could have kept dipping into savings every month to pay for it, but that doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah, when savings reaches zero, it's,
Miss you.
we're screwed.
We always, have to make sure that we don't have, well, I have my teaching pension, but I taught 7 years, it's not a big deal. But otherwise, we owned our own business, we had to make sure our savings will last as long as we do.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody told us when the expiration date is on us.
Yeah.
I always say we don't have it up stamped on the bottom of our foot.
Yeah, well, that would have been helpful, we could say, yeah, let's have a good time this weekend.
Wait a minute, here, check my foot. What's the date on
really,
it?
what
But,
And then they invent some new medicine, like my husband's valve. Oh my God, it was such an amazing, they could put a new valve on him. $140, $50 a month for 10 months. We thought this would cost us, this would wipe us out.
Oh, no, that's,
They could brought that down so much in
yeah,
price.
yeah.
We're thrilled.
Yeah, he sent us a picture of a house yesterday,
Aw.
about 1,900 square feet.
I'm beginning to clear out my house, I've already,
Two
3,000 pictures I've thrown away.
9/10 of an acre.
I'm sorting all around, I have another couple thousand left, but I'm giving everybody back
And more.
those that
You know,
belong
the
to
thing
them,
is,
because
get yourself
I don't
a
want to
nice
just throw it
lawnmower.
away.
My husband loved them. I'd hate to pay for that moving it out there then.
Well, it's not bad. It's gonna cost me about $3,000, but you've got a 30-day window where you can, from the time they drop it off at your house, then you reload it, they come pick it up, they take it to Laurel, and they put it in storage there if you don't have any place to send it yet. And the storage is $400 a month.
Well, you get that for a little storage place.
Yeah, so they'll do that, and then so the whole thing is $3,000.
You were down looking at the house?
We've looked at them online. He sent us pictures.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're okay.
Yeah.
There.
But we know the area because we were there in May.
Oh, you
Just-
were already, you've seen it then.
Oh yeah, we've been to the town. And the only reason we went there was the TV show Hometown is filmed in Laurel, Mississippi. It's a renovation show.
Okay.
There's a couple from Laurel. They go back 3, 4, 5 generations, and they wanted to make sure their town didn't die. So they've renovated over 100 homes so far.
Including yours?
No, we're not. No, we're not gonna. To try and go through them, you have to get on a waiting list because the show is so popular.
It's probably the best one. It's the kids who do this are wonderful. They really, I
They
told
were
Scott,
finally- they wanted to save their town because it was starting to die. It's a small town. It's only 25,000 people. I mean, it's small town USA.
Everybody's so nice.
How old is the house?
Well, we haven't picked anyone yet, but they're anywhere. One of them we looked at was built in 1920, but it's been completely renovated, all new AC, new everything in it, new floors, new roof. Then there's another one that we looked at was built in 1950. Another one was built in 2006.
But you couldn't go in and thump the walls and all that kind of stuff.
Well, we're gonna go there for a couple of days to look. You know, he's gonna get a few together, and then we'll decide when to go, and then we'll go spend a couple days and
Good for you.
binge house hunting.
See that the water pours out of the
Yeah,
sink.
Yeah,
Okay.
And
make
tax-
sure you're not
taxes-
right at the bottom of her belly.
Oh, no.
How about land? Have you got any land around it?
Some of them do. One of them sits on 9/10 of an acre. Another one sits on 3/4 of an acre. Another one is just a 1/4 acre lot. They're all,
And a lot of animals around?
we've
Coyotes?
only had one alligator sighting in the last year.
Okay. And room for your orchids.
All right, good morning.
Hello.
Seek ye first. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Hallelujah, hallelujah. And shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Ask and it shall be given unto you. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened unto you. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Let's pray. God, we're grateful that you're here with us today. We're grateful that we have the opportunity to join together and be in your presence. We ask that you would help us by your Spirit to seek first your kingdom. We love you and are grateful and look forward to what you have in store for us today. In your name we pray. Amen.
I think that's so important because I think the world drowns out God. There's just so much to do and think about that has to do with our life on earth. It overwhelms the spiritual side.
Yep.
Yep, life is super busy,
Yeah.
and there are, at least for us, there are just way too many options of what you can do with your time. It's not like when you just, I guess we have to imagine now when we imagine what life was like. I mean, just do this. 2 centuries is nothing in comparison to the age of the earth and the existence of humans. And just imagine 2 centuries ago, before the Industrial Revolution. I mean, life was very, very different. The options were survival or don't. And you did what you had to do just to keep a roof over your head and keep food in your mouth and kind of go from day to day. And now there are so many, the essentials of life. We really don't. We can just put it on autopilot almost. You can auto pay all your bills and just spend your time. We have free time. We were in getting ready for Labor Day weekend. I looked a little bit into the history of Labor Day, and it's essentially a celebration of workers' unions inside the United States and around the world. The United States and Canada has chosen to celebrate on a different day than the rest of the world. The rest of the world celebrates, I think, in May.
Oh.
But I don't think the focus of unions being celebrated is not really there as much anymore. If there are people that are a part of unions, it's going to be a big part of their life. But when you look at, I was looking through a little list of what came out of union work, and it's things like a 40-hour work week, a 5-day work week,
8-hour work day.
Children under 14 not being forced to work. So just these amazing changes. I think overall they're positive changes that we've gone through as humans, and we just have so much time to think. And if we don't, it's because all of our free time, we don't know what to pick, what to do with, because there's an infinite number of options, and truly picking something that is balanced and life-giving to do with the time that you have, where you're not working, is it's hard.
Yeah.
Because you have like a million people giving you advice on how to have a balanced life, and they don't all agree.
You talk about all the changes. My mother, she was born in 1913, I think. Anyway, she was always very excited that she was able to ride in a horse and buggy and watch a man land on the moon.
Yes, that's a good one.
Yeah,
But
that's
today it's our
amazing.
decisions. In those days, it was hours of hand washing clothes and ironing
yes.
clothes and the food you had to grow and then cook. It was a whole different kind of a world.
Oh, yeah.
Today it's just decisions.
Go to the store and you're done.
I had a lesson on a history of housekeeping, and in 1900, most people didn't have electricity, and there were only 70 bathtubs in all of New York City. And we knew a distant relative who never took a bath in her life, because when she was young, you had to haul a big tub to the kitchen in front of the fire and put hot water. So you did everything you could, one piece of your body at a time with a
Right.
cloth.
Yeah, sometimes I think about that when I'm in the shower and I have water running over me and then going into a drain, and I think like, this seems like an excessive amount of water to clean myself. We were the trip that I took to Africa. I took 2 trips when I was in seminary, 2 summer trips that were like a couple months each. And so living in Chad and Cameroon, very few places that we stayed had running water for a shower. And if you, sometimes the pumps would be working only certain times of the day. And sometimes you would be able to go into a shower, but the shower wasn't running. So you'd have to take a bucket with you and a cup of water and you realize you can do it. I mean, you can take a big bucket of water, get yourself wet, soak yourself up, and rinse yourself off, and that's all that you need. And when you're in this heat all day long, the bucket of cold water just feels amazing, you know. And you're clean, and when you're done, and so but we have these, and it doesn't cost much just to let the water just run
Water
over you.
might disturb you, but what bothers me about today,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of paper that we waste.
Mhm.
And those are trees. Every time I see a
Yeah.
pile, I go,
I love trees.
Yeah.
the trees they're taking down.
Yeah, I use way too many paper towels. I started cooking, being kind of like cooking primarily for the family, I guess for the last year, and I've really enjoyed it. But I've gotten to where it's like I go through these paper towels like so fast. I mean, I guess I could use a rag like
There you
the old
get
days,
just-
but
It It's all ads and all that, you just throw.
Oh yeah, yeah, that too. Oh yeah, the mailbox is basically just full of stuff you recycle. Yeah.
Yeah, we have our recycling bin right in the driveway, so we go to the mailbox and
Yep.
start looking through, we get to the recycling bin.
Yeah, that's right.
That's true.
Well, I use yellow sponges in the kitchen and pink sponges in the bathrooms. And
Ah.
I wash them when I do the wash, I just wash them with the hot water clothes. And because my husband just rips out a leaf, a long leaf of paper towels. And I was brought up, you take it and tear it in half and then save it to reuse it.
Yeah.
And we haven't
Yeah.
done that, so I just make sure I have sponges everywhere.
Well, it's a different pace, and the pace of life just keeps accelerating. I was watching some September 11 footage on Monday. So there's a YouTube video that I found, and it's a New York local New York channel that was showing some Good Morning show, some national Good Morning show when they went over to, this first tower just got hit, and then watched in real time what was being broadcast. And I thought, 20 years plus ago, that seems like a long time ago. And it seems like it was so different back then. People did have phones back then. They had cell phones,
Not this.
but it wasn't like everybody carrying smartphones. And I'm just imagining, can you imagine if that event had taken place the way we are now? We would have had billions of cameras from all these different angles catching these events and watching everything unfold. And it looked like primitive, the way that you had to rely on what was on TV, what they decided to show you, who they decided to interview.
Yeah.
Whereas today, you'd have people posting their own live streams and, Twitter and Instagram and all of that. You would have so many different perspectives. So all the perspectives that we have today versus 20 years ago it's so overwhelming. So
Let me tell you one little short story about that. I was working for an airport, and I went the day after to see, was everybody safe, are the planes on the whatever. They said, no, we have 2 planes in the air. I said, you're not allowed to. There's nobody who's supposed to fly.
Yeah, I remember
They
that.
said, well, they're coming in from the Midwest. I said, why? They're bringing in booties. I said, booties? For the dog's feet that have to go in with burning their feet
Oh,
off.
yeah.
oh wow.
Yeah.
So 2 planes were coming in with booties.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah. Stuff you don't think about.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So yes, finding a balance, finding in all of this, in the choices that we make, because we still have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We haven't gotten more of that.
Nope.
We just have more choices, and we deal with information overload, and it can be overwhelming. It can be easy just to find something that's entertaining and just to get a break from everything else all around. But I think it's easy to forget the simple options of, you can just sit in a chair and do nothing. You can simply turn everything off and read a book. Those options are still there. So prayer and meditation is probably more necessary now and more important now than ever, because it's the only time you would actually turn everything else off. And, I can see how...
Take a break.
Yeah, I can see how even getting into a time of prayer, it's going to take a while of praying just to slow down. The brain is moving so fast, so many different thoughts about everything that's happening in life, and just kind of getting that slow enough to just focus on that one thing that's important and just forget about everything else. That I think is where the church probably still has something to offer that you don't get everywhere else. The church used to essentially compete and we're competing with the social clubs in the area, and we're competing with the charitable organizations in the area, and we're competing with times of fellowship and even entertainment. Churches, can be a part of that. But the thing is, you can get better stuff outside of the church in those areas, clubs that are tailored to your interest, and social networks of people that fit you just right. And but when it comes to just a sacred, quiet time away from it all and focusing on that one thing that makes a difference, I think that's where the church I think we'll find our place again if we haven't gotten it already. But
coming to church and listening to the sounds of silence.
Yes.
Yep. So let's pick up, by the way, welcome Diane and Paula that are joining us today. Good to see you with us. Let's pick up where we left off last time with this paragraph. God's totally positive and lasting way of removing our shortcomings is to fill up the hole with something much better, more luminous, and more satisfying. Then your old shortcomings are not driven away or pushed underground as much as they are exposed and starved for the false program for happiness that they are. Like used scaffolding, our sins fall away from us as unneeded and unhelpful because now a new and better building has been found. This is the wondrous discovery of our true self and the gradual deterioration of our false and constructed self. So there's a whole lot there to think about. This is kind of at the heart of what we should be looking at, and that is, what is the difference between our true self and our false and constructed self? So we've talked a little bit about this kind of in terms of wearing a mask for different situations. We kind of put on our persona, our work persona, our fun persona, our family persona, our neighbor persona, whatever that is. We're always in some way going to be shifting a little bit in terms of what we're presenting of who we are. But the question is, are we in tune with our true self? This would be the foundational self, the real us. This would be, in Christianity, we've talked for centuries about the soul, a person's soul. So this would be the essence of the person. This is where the life force is. There is one of the parables that Jesus shares is about the vine and the branches. And so in this, I love this analogy because he talks about, I'm the vine, you are the branches. And we know what that means is God is the root and the trunk and the life force feeding us branches. And the question becomes, where does the vine end and the branch begin? And if you were to, if you're pruning, we can cut off parts of the branch. Where do you get to the place where you've finished cutting the branch and you're into the vine? Where is that? And I think the answer is, there is probably not a clear-cut line. And what that means is we're being fed by the divine and we are alive because of God, because of the life force of God, and the righteousness of God, the kingdom of God. All of that is what feeds us. And eventually we become what we think is something separate. We think, oh, I'm a branch. I've got my branch personality. I can do my branch things. I got my branch name. But the reality is a branch on its own is something that you're going to throw into a fire. It's because it doesn't grow. It doesn't produce leaves or fruit or anything like that. We have to be connected with the divine. So this is where our true self is so enmeshed and connected with God, with the divine, that and that's who we really are. So times of prayer, seeking first the kingdom, that's what we're seeking for, is that part. And we can't find that out in the world. We can't find that deep in our thoughts. It's something that we find because of the grace of God and because of our openness to the grace of God working in us. So let's, if we go back, just pull up our 12 somewhere here. That's not it. So these are the 12 steps. So when we're thinking about who we truly are and who we have what we have falsely identified with, when we start to think of ourselves as separate from God and think of ourselves as separate from one another, that's when we get into dysfunction. That's when we start to lose the life force. That's when we start to turn to addictions, because we're looking for vitality and we're looking for peace and we're looking for that thing that's really going to be meaningful for us. And any of those things that we turn to are not eternal. They will run their course. Ultimately, they won't give us what we want. So we have to, this is where we admit there are certain things in our life that we have become powerless over. We believe that it's God, it's connecting with the true vine that is going to restore us, and we decide to turn our will and our lives back over to God. And then we start to look inside into what are these things that is kind of causing us to drift away from who we truly are. Admitting to God, to other human beings, to ourselves, the exact nature once we start to find that out, and then be ready for God to bring us back. And here's where and then 7, which we're in right now, is where we ask, God, will you do your work of grace? And we have to just let God do it. That's when you're ready and you say, I'm ready, then you have to just wait and let God do it. Because if we could do it on our own, we wouldn't be doing these steps. We wouldn't, we would be, we wouldn't need God. We would be gods unto ourselves if it worked out that way. But we realize, oh, we're not.
I've been going to small groups in a church studying different books, and I felt that's helped me because I'm very self-critical and always see what I'm doing wrong, but I also look to see what other people are doing to see, well, maybe I can learn and read. But I have found being in small groups where people are honest helps me to be more true to who I am, because I feel like, well, we're all in this boat together, and I no longer see sin as other people and holy as me, but we're all both of those things. And being safe in an environment of people who are Christians and don't want to hurt you is really freeing. Yeah,
for sure. It's inspiring to be in a place of honesty. It is. That's what encourages us to be honest. Just like anything we learn as we grow from the time we're little, it's all being inspired by the things around us, good or bad. We look at the people around us and we emulate and we copy, and that's how we learn language. We don't take classes to learn English. You don't take classes. You just emulate, and you hear and you repeat, and then your brain kind of starts to catch on, and then you get on the same page with other people making these same sounds that are attached to, and figure out what these things mean. So that continues, and if we don't have, we can read about honesty, and we can, but until we see it emulated, if I think about this, who are the people that I know or have known that have truly inspired me to grow and to become who I really am? And it's not a lot. It's kind of the narrow way that Jesus talks about. There's a whole lot of noise around us, and there's a whole lot of things that really aren't worth emulating.
You're waiting for that one
for us, right? And some things may be good for somebody else, and they're just not going to work for you.
Right.
But to find people that just through them living inspire us. And by inspire means we don't just sit and be like, yay, but we actually want to do the same thing. We want to copy it. We want to do that too. So being honest is it.
And the people I've known have been the most helpful and inspiring to me. I knew long enough that I know they had bad faults.
Sure,
The
right.
first minister I had, who was so helpful for me to not think I had to do everything right all the time, he was authoritarian. He was from that generation, but he started studying this kind of thing in 1970 when people thought he was a lunatic, but he was so confident in himself that we just did it. And I felt like, I'm so glad he was that figure who, now you can do all these things you couldn't do then.
Mm-hmm.
But if people who are breaking through have to have more, I don't know,
What an
audacity.
influence your father had on you.
Oh, for sure.
Think about it.
Oh, definitely.
Wow.
Yeah, definitely. In ways that I'm still discovering. Yeah, sure. Some of it is just DNA. I mean, it got passed on to me, and I'm stuck with that, good and bad. But so much of it is the time that I was able to spend, that I have been able to spend with my dad has had a big impact for sure. Yep. Yeah, and just think about, there are a lot of family members that we spend time with, but the way that we organize our lives now, as we're growing, there are a lot of people that we spend a lot of time with that are not family. Like there are teachers, if a child is in a classroom, especially when you're younger, if you have the same teacher for all your subjects, you may be with your teacher more than you are with anybody else. And that can be great, and that can be maybe not so great, just depending. I mean, hopefully we take the good stuff and we kind of let the bad stuff.
And how is your study coming right now?
Well, I've decided, I shared with the steering committee this, but I decided to withdraw from the doctoral program.
Really?
Yeah. And it's been kind of a journey, looking at my motivations for wanting to do further education. One was kind of just self-enrichment. I just wanted to learn some more. And I did, in the classes that I've taken so far, I did learn how to access a lot of academic and scholarly work that I didn't know how to access before. It's not just something you can find on the internet or just pick up a book from a bookstore, but there are journal articles and books that are written that are not really mainstream popular that are very, very good. And so finding how to access that has been good. But ultimately, when you're looking at having a doctoral degree, you know, those extra letters by your name, the big benefits for that were it opens opportunities to go into like denominational work or work with bigger churches, but it's not really needed for work in the regular size local church. And as time has gone on, and as I've looked at how I apply this stuff that I'm learning to what I want to do with it, I just kind of realized more and more that I feel my place in the local church is where I want to be.
You really didn't need it.
Yeah.
Yay.
So I don't need it to continue to do this. And then the other reason why I felt like I didn't need it is that it feels like the type of work that needs to be done to make the local church maintain its identity, find its place in this present world and in the future is going to take real change and real creativity. And we're not going to get that from higher education, because higher education is there to solidify the institutions that are already in place. And the institutions that are already in place are not working right now. That's why there's such decline in all of our churches, is that we're not adapting and changing to fit in with where society is right now. And all churches are declining, but particularly the mainline churches like that we're a part of, Presbyterian, Methodist, Episcopal, Lutheran. These churches, especially in the last 20 years, have gone through significant declines, 20 to 40% declines. And it doesn't look like those trends are changing anytime soon. And the reason why they're not is that we haven't made major adaptations to do it differently. So it felt like if I'm going to put energy into kind of us all figuring out how we make these changes to continue to let the church be a relevant part of life for people, it's going to be more creativity and experimentation than it is going to be trying to do the old way better. Yeah. So, yeah, I've shared that with the steering committee last month. I need to share that with everybody because I announced it with everybody. But sometimes sharing it in these smaller groups is a good start. Yeah. But thanks for asking that.
Thanks for staying.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I feel like when the country was, and it was like just in the 1960s, the country was still pretty much half rural. Mm-hmm. Well, then you needed to be with people, and you were just thrilled to be able to go to church on Sunday morning. Your mom never got out of the house. My aunt said the greatest invention of her modern life, when she was born in 1906, was that they paved the roads, because she was stuck at home all through the winter because the roads were muddy. Mm-hmm. Well, I can't even fathom that. But when you got out, you wanted to get out.
Right.
Now I want to be home.
I think a huge part of the church's decline, of Sunday morning worship declining, it's probably tied into how the way that we do work. So we used to be like usually there was one member of the household that worked an outside job. There was a member of the household that kind of kept the home running, and then kids. So that fit with a Sunday morning on the weekend, let's do this kind of a thing. If you have two people in the house both working all week, and the only time that you have to really get back to your family, do your family stuff, whether it's chores around the house or just spending time together, that's relegated to those 2 days on the weekend. It makes it so much harder. Because like I fortunately grew up with my mom at home from the time that I was born until I went to school. She was a nurse, and when I was born, she decided that she would stay at home with me. And then my 2 brothers came along after. So she stayed at home with us until my youngest brother started kindergarten or first grade. And then she started going back to work part-time. But what that meant is we got to stay home. We got to be raised at home. And we had all of this effort and energy going into family life that was coming from mom primarily. And then that let us do, we found a balance that way. But finding a balance when you have 2 full-time working parents is, we're still figuring that out. And I don't know that we're doing a great job at it. This is back to the doctoral program. This is another thing that I noticed. Even though I cut from 40 hours a week down to 30 in May last year, so that gave me some more at-home time. Well, my wife is still working full-time, and when I soon after that put my doctoral classes in there, it actually meant that I was basically still working full-time, if not a little bit more than that. And when I took the summer off and decided not to do classes during the summer, and I realized this is a good balance. Then I realized, like, I don't want to keep striving and striving, like, for what? Ultimately, you're striving so you can eventually get to the place of balance and relaxation, and but it's like, if you can do it now, so
Don't you think a half of the downside of the church, because of the mobility of all the families, that they're not staying in one place anymore?
right,
Which is
and
a big
it
difference.
emotionally and psychologically, to root yourself into a community takes so much. I mean, you're basically marrying yourself to a big family when you're joining a church. And if you're going to keep doing that every 2, 3, 4 years, it's too much. It's too much like getting together and breaking up and getting together and breaking up. So it's just easier just to not do it and just maybe find your
unfortunately,
connection
with the way
other ways.
The busyness of today's families, all churches are not alike by any stretch. And if you happen to go to a church that's not your fit, you can get a feeling that, well, this is the way all churches are. The heck with this. I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
In my church in New Jersey, once in a while, we would have a Saturday night service and a potluck and give everybody Sunday morning off. And I used to kid them and say, don't forget to come back here, but
Yeah.
And it was fun. Everybody loved it.
Good.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, ways to fit into life, because that's what we want to be. Is we want, as the church, we want to be a part of everyday life for people. And sometimes that means, we have an idea of what that used to mean is go to church and Sunday school, Sunday morning. Sometimes some churches would have a Sunday evening service. A lot of churches would have a Wednesday service. So at least when I was growing up, it was pretty much one of the days of the weekend is already a church day, and then a Wednesday night as well. And then sometimes you would have some other special events now. But it's like we were talking about at the very beginning, finding that balance of where we spend our time is just so tricky. And if we can we don't have to take up as much time as we did, in the 80s or in the 70s with people's lives as the church. As long as it's really meaningful and people are really connected. And a lot of regularly attending church people, the average used to be once a week, and now the average is, maybe twice a month, or maybe once a month. That is regular, for a lot of people. But yeah, it's
Especially if you have a job where you have to work Sunday.
yeah.
A lot of sports or something.
Right. There's so many events. Usually Saturday, you're trying to clean the house, run the errands, get done what you need to do, rest a little bit, and then Sunday is the only kind of relaxed day. That's why they do a lot of games on Sunday, because families are kind of in relaxation mode. But yeah, we're still working on it. If we have something that's worthwhile that people can't get other places, people will make it work, make the church a part of their lives,
I think that it's good that your sermons and Sunday morning service is relevant to our lives, because when people are just hungry to get together with other people, sometimes the sermons were pretty irrelevant to people's life, because you're there just to see other people and learn a little bit. But that wasn't important to learn something that applies to your whole life.
Right. I would. Now, I grew up in Protestant churches. I've always been in Protestant churches, so I've been used to, I'd say, at least 20-25 minutes of a sermon every week, if not a little bit more. When I was in the Pentecostal world, an hour was common.
Just getting started. Huh?
Yeah. Yes, those can go between 45 minutes and an hour and a half, just depending on what happens. But I've been, and I did not grow up in Catholic churches or Lutheran or Episcopal churches, but the more liturgical churches, typically the homily is like, 10 minutes? 10 or 15 minutes? The sermon.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And usually it's something that's read. But yeah, that's my goal has tried. I want it to be relevant for me. I mean, there's no reason to just read the Bible. If it doesn't make any sense for me right now, then why do I read it?
Unfortunately, with so much of the Bible, you need to have an explanation of what you're reading.
Yeah.
Because
yeah,
you can get all kind of.
Yeah, and even if you have a good study Bible, sometimes it's like, okay, that's nice, but it doesn't necessarily hit home. It doesn't necessarily make
How does this connect to my life?
Right.
Well, what does he really mean?
Yeah, what does this really mean?
Some of it's so deep that you just really need a little help figuring it out.
So let's move on to right relationship with life itself is the section, this next section. Addiction uses up our spiritual desire. So this is kind of the first idea to talk about. Gerald May, a dear and now deceased friend of mine, said in his very wise book, Addiction to Grace, that addiction uses up our spiritual desire. So let's kind of define our spiritual desire. Our spiritual desire is we want to connect with the source of this life. We want to for this life to be meaningful, we need to connect with what this is really all about. Why is this here? We're never going to know the why stuff, really. We can play around with it. But we want to connect with what this life really means. And if we're spiritually hungry, we're willing to take risks and to be surprised as to what life really is about. What happens with addiction is the things that we become addicted to are certainties. They are absolutely certain. So we know that if I do this, or this, these addictive types of behaviors, they're essentially behaviors that give us happiness, this temporary happiness, this temporary joy, this temporary excitement. aliveness. So we're looking for aliveness. We're looking for the essence of life, and we find a little tiny version of that in drinking something or smoking something, or doing something with gambling.
It's a substitute.
It's a substitute. Now our phones have this. This can contain a multitude of addictions within it. You can do all of your favorite things here. You can't drink or smoke this, but there are a lot of other things that we can do. And when if you've watched any of the recent documentaries about social media is designed with psychology in mind, with the idea that if I can keep this person connected and feeling the buzz, they'll stay connected as much as possible. Now that can happen with Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. It can happen with these things. Essentially, it's just you get a good feeling. The miniature videos like TikTok or YouTube Shorts or Facebook Reels, they're very addictive. I didn't even bother to look at them until, I don't know, a couple years ago. And you start watching, and it's like you can stay connected watching these things for hours. It's almost like the closest thing that I can think of is like when we used to have America's Funniest Home Videos. So America's Funniest Home Videos are really short clips of funny stuff that people sends in. So you just cram a bunch of those into an hour, right? And you just watch one after the other. Well, this, you can watch even more.
Even longer.
It doesn't stop, and you can skip the commercials, and you can just stay there watching. There's so much funny stuff, outrageous stuff,
And if you come across
amazing
one you
stuff.
don't like, you can flip ahead and
You
find
just
one you
flip
do.
ahead if you don't like it. And it doesn't have to be funny. It can be really interesting. If you're interested in mechanics, if you're interested in art, if you're interested in whatever, you can just keep going. So what those things do is they stimulate that life vitality thing, right? But what we can end up doing is, instead of picking up the paintbrushes and painting a picture on our own and going through the process, we can sit there and watch 1,000 videos of different people painting different things. And one is a lot slower paced. It's time involved. It's messy. It is intentional, but there is a real life experience there to be had in a real painting versus sitting here watching all the painting. So we also, another thing that has before social media became a thing, I think it was around the early 90s with the Gulf War, when the news became 24-hour news. That's when CNN really took off.
Yep.
And that's when cable television comes into our homes, and you can watch the news all day long. And it's easy to get addicted to the news. So we're not only addicted to the funny stuff, the exciting stuff, we're addicted to the drama, and we're addicted to the risk and the terror and the horror and the
And I'm glad I'm not in that situation.
and here's the thing, is that we actually need in our lives, in our real lives, we need risk and we need challenge, and we will face really tough things, but in real time that connects to like our spiritual life. And whereas sitting in front of the TV and watching everybody else go through it while we eat and drink and whatever, that's that substitute. So the things we're getting addicted to are the things that are some tiny dose of what's real, but it doesn't require the commitment, it doesn't require the mess, the thoughtfulness. It's just easy. The things we get addicted to, they're easy, in some ways. What we find out is that ultimately it's not easy because we've just complicated our lives and weighed them down. So this is why we say addiction uses up our spiritual desire. If we just stay focused on kind of the alternative version of the real, then we don't want to do the real thing. This is a huge challenge for my son's generation. My son's generation is, I don't know, they call it the I generation, the Z generation, or there's different names for it. It's not the millennials,
No.
yeah, but it is the generation that came after the millennials. And essentially, I heard a psychologist describe this the other day. The starting point for this generation is when kids started getting smartphones and going onto social media in their adolescent years, which would be like Ian's age group. When they because the millennials didn't have access to that when they were adolescents. So when that happened, we're seeing a new life experience with this generation, because for them, the real and this version of the real is so enmeshed together that it's not clearly separated like it is for us. For us, it's clearly separated. I can tell when I'm doing real stuff and not real stuff, because I grew up not doing real stuff. So, I grew up doing real stuff. We had growing up, we could only watch an hour of television a day. That was all we were allowed to do. And we could have like one dessert very rarely and all that kind of. So I grew up in a pretty restrictive environment, but an environment that was very connected with real stuff, with nature, with building things, with cleaning things, with exercising and all of that. When you get to this generation, people are having real conversations with one another through devices that were not available. So I spent time with my friends and I talked with my friends a lot. If I added up the number of hours that I was on the phone or with somebody in a car, at a park, at a restaurant or whatever, if I added up all that time, my son's generation is spending more time with their friends than I was spending with my friends. So in a way, that's good. Now what they're doing together, a lot of it's talking, and then a lot of it is sharing stuff. Just like we used to sit together and read magazines together, sit together, oh, look at this, oh, look at that, ha, ha, ha. And then, what they're doing now is they can talk to one another, watch each other on video, and just throw electronically pictures, videos, and stuff, and they can have conversations. So there's really good ways that they're connected, but then it's also enmeshed in this non-real world that is easy to get addicted to. Another thing that this generation is dealing with now is they're getting way more social feedback on them from other people than we used to get. We used to get, maybe you would have somebody that would tell you to your face what they thought of you, good or bad. I really like you. I think you're lousy, or whatever. We would have those kind of conversations. Maybe somebody passes you a note. This is what I think of you. I really like you. I hate you, or whatever. So we got this a little bit of feedback, and we'd have conversations about who we are. Now with social media, you can have your entire friend group all at once tell you what they think of you instantly, moment after moment throughout the day. So this is why the suicide rate and the rate of kids hurting themselves, particularly cutting themselves, has skyrocketed more for young girls in Ian's generation than ever before in all the data that we have on kids. And it's because, there's no more drug use today than there was in previous generations. And I think in some ways, this generation, the kids are more self-aware of the impacts of drugs, and they're probably less likely to use them maybe than the last couple generations. Yeah. But what they're getting is they're getting this feedback that is so much larger than a single person really should be exposed to. So it's good to have some feedback, but in some ways you don't want it. I mean, it's hard. Like I've talked about coming to a new church. When you're the new pastor on the block, you can count on it that especially in the first 2-3 years, you're going to get a lot of feedback about what people think of you. And it's like some of it might be positive, some of it might be negative, but it's just like any person getting that much feedback, it makes you really self-conscious. And it tends to make you try to be something or somebody that you're really not. It's hard to be your true self when you're dealing with all this feedback. So
it's so much easier to be so mean when you're texting.
Oh yeah, because you don't have to stand in front of the person and see their feedback, and when you're texting, you don't have anybody saying it's my turn to talk, and the other part is that when you look at communication between people, I'm not going to have the stats exactly, but it's really high that it's something like 80% of communication between people is done through body language. And then facial expressions is part of body language, and then your words and your tone is another. So you're going to lose tone of your voice tone. You're going to lose the volume of how you're saying it. You're going to lose the body language. You're going to lose the facial expression of what people are really saying when you limit it to just words. And so take texting with a grain of salt.
You talk to somebody, you're going to see them on your little phone or wherever.
Yeah.
You're not going to lose that. Before long, everybody will see each other when they're talking.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Yeah, there is more. There's
now.
more. Yeah, you can do it now, and it's better. It's better to see somebody's face. You get a better sense than through a text. But you can shift into mean mode, and you wouldn't normally be that mean. It's like road rage. It's like normally the average person going about their life is not going to be that big of a jerk, but you put them behind a wheel and you give them, whatever it is, a couple tons of machinery, and suddenly you feel like you're invincible and you do things that you wouldn't normally do. And texting can do that to us. But texting also, I remind myself and I tell people around me, don't take the text too seriously. Even if people are using all caps and all that kind of stuff, you can read somebody's text and you can read it in the voice that you think that they said it, and it could be right on or it could be way off. It's really hard to tell. It could be worse than you think it is too. So these addictions, these false ways of spending our time and living, if we engage in those things, it will eat up our spiritual desire. So it's back to what we were saying at the very beginning. Finding that real and balanced way to live is so hard. Let's look at this. Let's see how much we have. I don't know if we'll be able to finish. Many people in recovery often have a unique and very acute spiritual sense, more than most people, I would say. It just got frustrated early and aimed in the wrong direction. Wild need and desire took off before boundaries, strong identity, impulse control, and deep God experience were in place. Now this will give us some insight into how this spiritual desire is created. So spiritual desire is created in the good sense, when a person has learned boundaries, when a person has a strong identity, when a person has impulse control and they have a deep God experience, when we have those things in place, we can have a very healthy spiritual life and a healthy spiritual desire. But if for some reason our boundaries are misunderstood, personal boundaries, and we can have lots of sessions on personal boundaries, on there's sacred space that is between you and God that should be untouched by everybody else. It's a sacred, valuable, this is the soul. And then out of that, we come into relationship with other people, and we have to learn how to interact with people in ways where we're helping one another to live. We're supporting one another. We're growing with one another. And we're not either keeping somebody too far at arm's distance and not really getting engaged with them, not being honest, not being our true selves, or we can get so involved in each other's lives that we end up trying to live somebody else's life for them instead of letting them live their own life. So that's the whole boundary thing. And that's something that can take a lifetime to learn. A strong identity, knowing who you are, impulse control, knowing I'm not going to start watching this today because if I start, I'm not going to be able to stop. I'm not going to eat that today because if I start, I'm not going to be able to stop. I'm not going to go say what I really think of that person to their face because if I start, I'm not going to be able to stop. So this is impulse control. It's knowing what might come up and take over inside of you. And then there's having a real, genuine, deep God experience. So having all those in place is very important to the spiritual life. And if those are not addressed correctly, that's when the addictive behavior comes in. So this is probably a good spot for us to pick up on next time.
Yes, but let me tell you, this is 12 steps of what brought my son to God before he died.
Yeah, that's great.
That's fabulous.
Yeah. It's so practical and so straightforward, and it really is it's there to help people know themselves, become better selves, and ultimately to connect with something that is beyond all of us. That's the goal here. All right. Well, we did a couple paragraphs today. We'll pick up with this one. I think this one will be a good starter for next time. Yeah. And then we have just a little bit more before we get into chapter 8, which is a list of persons we've harmed and being willing to make amends to them. So that's when we get into the rubber meets the road of where have I gotten off track in my life and how has that impacted other people? And what can I do to make that right? All right. See ya. Send us out in the power of your Spirit.